Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Specification Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guests today are Christopher Roach, Principal, and Jacquelyn Fung, Studio Director at Studio VARA in San Francisco, California. Christopher is a San Francisco-based architect and urbanist with over 25 years of professional experience and a deep commitment to both the craft and the intellectual ambition of architecture. Before co-founding Studio VARA, Christopher worked at several notable offices in San Francisco, Austin, and Germany, and has engaged with a wide range of project types from custom residences and affordable housing to commercial offices and academic institutions. Over her 20-plus years of experience, Jackie has jumped from custom residential and high-end retail to transportation, healthcare, education, urban planning, commercial interiors, housing, and back again. The advantage of accumulating these varied perspectives has given her the confidence to meet challenges of varying complexity. At Studio VARA, Jackie has continued to build on her wide range of experience by tackling new projects of all shapes and sizes, while always staying focused on the design problem in its purest form and its respective solution. The project we will be chatting about today is the Redwood Highway Offices in Mill Valley, California. The Redwood Highway Offices began as an adaptive reuse project that transformed the most banal of commercial box buildings into a light-filled courtyard office space specifically outfitted for a discerning high-end residential builder with an exclusive clientele. Architectural design for the building was driven by four main objectives: to embody the client's enigmatic brand, to embrace the industrial aesthetic, to strategically introduce natural daylighting, and to execute the project efficiently via a well-detailed, judicious use of materials. Now, let's get into the details. Beautiful, huh? Welcome to Detailed. My guests today are Christopher Roach, Principal, and Jacquelyn Fung, Studio Director at Studio VARA in San Francisco, California. The project we are going to talk about today is the Redwood Highway Offices in Mill Valley, California. Chris and Jackie, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
Good. Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join me today. I have to admit that I have an extra fondness for West Coast architects, being my guest, being a West Coaster myself. So I'm really happy to have you here today, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's just get right down to business. I typically start with an icebreaker question. They're all over the board. You never know what I'm going to ask. You guys aren't getting a silly one today. You're actually getting a smart one. So broadly, not project specific, because we'll get into that a little more later with the project, but broadly, tell me why repositioning and adaptive reuse have merged as today's design strategies. These projects are not always cheaper or as easy to conform to current codes or regulations or standards. So why more of these types of projects now? Can you elaborate on that for me?
Jackie, you want to start?
Yeah, well, just to start, I think it should be said that repositioning and adaptive reuse, they used to just be called renovation.
Yeah. Fancy words for the same thing.
Yeah. But now the fancy words are reflecting, today's trends and needs, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I think, one of the reasons that this has become such a hot topic, and, there's conferences, there's books, specifically about repositioning or adaptive reuse, is, I think, number one, our community realizing that the most sustainable thing that we can do with our built environment is to extend the life of the buildings that we already have. And, we all know, and we see it, in every project that we start that has demolition. It's painful. It's painful to watch, even if it's a worthless kind of old building, all of this material with all its, embodied carbon and, labor and everything, knocked down and dragged off to a landfill.
The waste.
It's the waste.
It doesn't matter your budget or your background.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and that's not a new thing. I think that there's a higher consciousness now, and there are enough, I'd say, high-profile architects or architecture firms that have really embraced that as a practice and put a capital A architecture on the idea of, adaptive reuse or repositioning, from Thomas Heatherwick to Deborah Burke to you name it. There's now a kind of elevation of those kinds of projects from what I, think was probably unfairly perceived as, yeah, that's interesting and it has a great purpose, but it's not really, you can't really make capital A architecture out of that. And I think that's no longer true.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely no longer true. I've seen some amazing projects recently that were exactly that. But for listeners, and actually kind of for me too, in this, of course, I know what adaptive reuse is, but this is really the first time I've heard repositioning, the term repositioning used in the context. So can you define that for me and for any of our other listeners going, what does he mean by repositioning?
I think it comes from the real estate industry, frankly. So, take it with a grain of salt that there's a little bit of marketing spin in that. Adaptive reuse is kind of, it's too many words and it's technical. Repositioning, I think.
Sounds smarter.
It sounds smarter, it sounds more, I don't know, techie. But
the emphasis is on the market. That's
exactly
capital
and the capital. And I think and I think it can capture a broader range of touches on existing buildings, from refreshing the lobby of a commercial building. That's kind of lobby repositioning, to changing a use of a building and, giving it a new life that way, to more, full scale demolition and, heavier touch kind of, what we call renovations. Right. So I think, that's my sense, is that, that's where that term comes from. And I think because it's seen as kind of a smart or savvy, tactic, then architects, kind of hitch themselves to that. Of course, it's, if architects say they drop the term and, say that they know what they're doing, then real estate agents call them and give them work. Right?
Well, I can.
I need a secret word.
Yeah.
I can totally see how that could come from there. Now that you kind of explained that to me, like repositioning that building in the market
exactly
makes a lot more, if I thought of repositioning in a building, it's like, oh, you're moving the building over on the site, but repositioning it in the market by doing these things to it makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah.
Sense to me. And and we have to come up with new cute terms for things that we've always been doing. But I do like it, the comment that you made, Jackie, about we do it differently these days. And maybe that does deserve a new term, because I've been around for a while, and I remember when buildings got ripped down regularly without a second thought to that pile of stuff going to the landfill. And everybody's thinking about that now.
Yeah.
And, how can we do better? So maybe it needs a new term so that we don't do things the way we've always done it.
Right.
Which
Right.
I hate. Okay, so let's start talking about this project, starting with a broad description, because we'll get into some more details. Describe this project for me and the client's goals, the need. What's the background of that brought you to the table to do this job, and start this project on its journey?
Yeah.
You want me to start and you can finish it off? Okay. I don't know how far back into how it came to a story you want to go, but I can go there and you can edit it out.
History.
It's interesting that within the framework of our practice, this was kind of one of our first, what I call stretch projects. Our practice started really as, residential focused. I had done more commercial and multifamily, and Jackie had done, lots of commercial and, new cities in China and airports and things like that. But as Studio VARA, we were really, working on custom homes. And there was an individual who was the owner's representative for a large home we did. And we developed a great relationship with him and built a lot of trust with him. And he worked for, at the time, the top-notch, high-end residential home builder, general contractor in the Bay Area called Van Acker Construction. And they were, at the time, growing and looking for space, and they found this building, and he tapped us to help them at the beginning just do a refresh of the interior of the building. So the building itself is what we call a big dumb box. It was a stucco box with a fake classical pediment entry and a funky partial mansard roof on it that was originally an Ethan Allen showroom. Anybody remembers Ethan Allen furniture?
Yeah, that's like the back there.
And it's on Redwood Highway, which is the main kind of highway artery that leads, from Southern California to Northern California, passes through San Francisco and up through Marin County and Mill Valley. It is located in this very small strip of commercial buildings, kind of on the frontage road of Redwood Highway. And it's the last building in that row. And the contractor, Van Acker, was looking for a place that was big enough for their in-office staff, that had a lot of storage, because they actually do store, some materials for their projects. And that was a little bit under the radar. This was one of the kind of interesting parts of the design brief, was that they're a firm that has an incredible reputation but doesn't really advertise. It's sort of if you know that you should hire them. And Gary Van Acker, who's the founder, really wanted this building to be, as he called it, a stealth building. So he liked that it was easy to find, but kind of, not super prominent. And it's 30,000 square feet, a big square, one floor that's all interior space and one whole basement space that daylights to the, parking because of the slope of the site. So it was a perfect fit for them, but, you know, it was a crappy, you know, building that was built to last 20, 25 years, right? It was CMU foundation, retaining walls. It was, you know, 2x framing for the perimeter walls, for the exterior walls. I think like 2x4, not even 2x6. And its only redeeming kind of structural quality was once they ripped down the, you know, T-bar ceilings, they discovered that the roof structure was actually these really beautiful, big, like 20-inch deep glue lamps. And then, you know, dimensional lumber purlins in between, and then, you know, a nice kind of sheathing for the roof. And then those glue lamps were supported at, you know, in between points on nice little thin steel columns. And then the floor was joists above the basement. So as I said, it started as, well, we're just going to, you know, rip out these ceilings and expose this cool roof structure, and, you know, maybe add a couple of new skylights, because, you know, there were hardly any windows at all. It was a you know, dark, you know, artificially lit retail showroom.
Yeah, it was also, the footprint of the building it was huge. It was like 125 square. And this was the kind of furniture showroom, not like today's, where you walk in the Crate and Barrel and it's like all light filled and everyone's feeling like inspired, you know. It was just like almost 80s-ish, where it was like a, you know, a bunch of partitions and dark spaces that were all artificially lit. And every corner you turn, it's like a new, you know, dark bedroom.
Right. Little kind of artificially lit vignettes. Furniture.
Yeah.
So,
fast.
Yeah. So anyway, they were going to rip all of that out and just, you know, make a nice interior space. And we started working on design, and this is an interesting track of the story that we can pick up later. But because they're general contractors building this building for themselves, they did not follow the traditional, you know, linear design, bid, build, project delivery. It was going to be a little bit more freestyle, a little bit more design build. And so we started design and they started demo before we even had, you know, even a permit.
And they wanted it yesterday.
Of course.
Every client wants it done yesterday.
Every client wants it done yesterday, especially, you know, general contractor who, you know, is ready to just go. And as they started doing demo, they did some, you know, forensic demo of the exterior of the building, and discovered that it was just 2x4 framing. It was, you know, really, you know, like toothpicks. And there was a ton of dry rot behind all this, you know, stucco. So they kind of, not on purpose, grew the scope into we're going to rip off the entire envelope of the building and resheath it. And that opened this whole realm of possibilities for, you know, kind of rethinking the exterior expression of the building, adding windows and skylights, etc. So I'm going to kick it to you to talk about, you know, the parking and the...
Yeah. I mean, this is so far classic scope creep, right? You think you just want to sit and polish, and now suddenly we're talking about taking it down to its framing.
Yeah.
And, you know, the broad design brief is to transform this big dumb box into an office. But, you know, contractor thinks it's an easy thing to do. We just want to move in. help get us in there. But it involved a change of occupancy, change in use. And we soon learned that going from retail to business was going to require a different parking count. Sounds pretty innocuous until you try to lay it out and realize we were nowhere close to what we needed. And they had a dedicated parking lot right in front. And we soon realized that in order to make it fit wasn't going to be to magically find some more spaces and knock out trees or whatever. It just there wasn't a way, and it was to take a hard look at the existing square footage of this building and try to reduce that instead. So kind of back into the amount of parking that we had in our lot. And that's when we started to think that courtyards, which were courtyards and bringing light in, were going to work together to really shape the partie of this design.
Yeah, I always, I'm sure you've heard this before, but like to say that foreign follows parking, unfortunately. And, usually that means that you're, in a new project, you're whatever, laying out parking on surface parking or a parking garage, and, your building has to kind of work its way around that. In this case, as Jackie said, the parking was fixed and the building was already there. And the only way to square the circle here was to extract some square footage from the building somehow. And of course they didn't want to lose square footage. We didn't want to just lock a part of the building off.
And that wasn't really in the budget either, any more than, stripping the entire, facade.
Right. So we kind of had an aha moment and said, look, if we carve out a courtyard or a couple of courtyards in the center of the building, this big 125 by 125 foot, footprint that was even with new windows, was going to be hard to daylight adequately. And we thought, okay, we can reduce the square footage. We can create these glassy courtyards in the center that bring more daylight in and actually create some accessible outdoor space for people to, that work in the building to be able to enjoy, because, that the outdoor space around the building was more kind of ornamental and a buffer to the highway. It's not really pleasant space to occupy. So it was sort of an interesting win-win-win that really drove the entire, partie and design of the project.
Right.
Oh, there's just going to be so many good questions here. I've had a couple guests. We'll get into that later. I won't say it now. So in our icebreaker question, we chatted about repositioning and adaptive reuse. And now that I know exactly what we mean by that, you also mentioned in some of your materials, or maybe some of my trolling of you I did on the internet, which I regularly do. You mentioned that challenges can arise when unexpected codependencies unfold on this type of project. And I'm just like, okay, I need to know what that means. But tell me about the codependencies on this job.
I think what we're referring to there with codependency is that the parking in the area were, inherently now tied together with, light and air and the quality of the space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which just doesn't always happen, and you expect one to be its own thing, the other to really drive the design more often. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we would never, independent of the parking thing, if we'd been able to figure out how to get more cars on this lot, we would never have been able to convince the client to remove square footage from the building. Yeah. And we could have said, oh, it's gonna be dark, you're gonna want more daylight and these outdoor spaces. And they would have been like, yeah, that's nice. But we're gonna have as much leasable square footage as we can. you know, because they're smart business people, right? But that's where the unexpected codependencies become a kind of agent for architecture. And that, I think, is, you know, that can become the architect's superpower, really. Like when we are able to find something that we really believe in and that you know, we're committed to in design, and find a way or discover a way that it's linked to something that you just can't argue with, you know, code or, you know, durability or budget, and kind of do the judo move and turn that on its head so that it becomes this win-win. I think that's the magic of architecture.
Right. And that's the way to defend the design,
right?
To write it into the DNA.
Yeah.
You can't pull it apart anymore.
Well, at the end of the day, you had no choice. And what a fantastic solution. I mean, it's one thing if you're doing a new building and you have parking problems. I've worked on plenty of projects with, okay, we got to find more parking on this site.
Right.
Because like you said, you figure out the parking first and then you design your building around it. But when you have an existing building and existing parking and you have to find it, you got to get pretty creative. And while the client may have been okay with that darker space, you know, employee comfort and happiness is also a much bigger deal these days.
Yeah.
And on a site where basically you got a freeway and buffers and you don't have an outdoor space to hang out, I know I was sitting there thinking, oh, what a fabulous way to solve that problem and also serve the people that have to be in that building, you know,
right.
Day in and day out for however long they work there, of having an outdoor space to get some fresh air or go make a phone call or have their lunch on a nice day. That is, nobody wants to go sit by the freeway, even if you've got some shrubs between you.
Right.
So in the end, I think it's a win-win for everybody. Hopefully the client ended up loving that, because I'm looking at pictures. That's why I keep looking to my left. It's not because I'm, you know, surfing the internet or watching videos over here. I'm looking at pictures of the project as we talk, and I don't see a big dumb box, and I don't see dark.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't see an 80s Ethan Allen showroom.
Yeah. No.
No sign of it there. I would love to see before pictures.
Well, and another benefit that also spoke to the client, you know, and their business, was that they do have clients, their clients, come into this building. So it, you know, it couldn't be the you know, typical contractor's office that's, you know, very practical and drop ceilings and, you know, like this built, it did have to impress. And that was a little bit a part of the brief, you know, like, hey, they've got, you know, you drop the names, you know, high net worth, you know, Bay Area VC or tech person coming into this building. It couldn't be shabby. So there was, at the end of the day, in creating this incredible, you know, light-filled, pleasant, open interior, there was a business, you know, benefit to that.
I can see that. Let's get into more design specifics. So we've talked about it a little bit. You know, repositioning the big dumb box. I love that, the big dumb box. I think that plaque should be on the building somewhere. This used to be a big dumb box. You know, we talked about, you know, stripping out ceilings and walls and that kind of thing. Tell me in more detail about the design. I'm going to flip this a little bit. Let's start with the exterior shell of the building.
Okay.
You know, so we're talking about some toothpicks there in the walls. What did you guys do? Because it's pretty cool looking on the outside. What did you do with the exterior shell and your wall assemblies as well to make it a sturdier and guessing needed to be a more tight building?
Right. Yeah. Well, to start with, actually, we did research on, you know, what the language of the context was. And I think, you know, we had to do some convincing of the local planning department on tying this into the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And luckily, affinity for metal panels tied in together with the amount of car dealerships that were around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what was the aesthetic that you mentioned earlier with that our client?
The stealth.
The stealth.
Yeah.
I think that definitely comes in play inside and out.
Yeah.
And how we ended up with our language of metal exteriors.
Yeah.
Yeah. To start with.
Yeah. The strip of buildings, the commercial buildings, most adjacent. I mean, it's a hodgepodge of styles, but there are buildings with metal on them, and they're generally a kind of brownish dark palette. So we were able to kind of hang our hat on that in terms of convincing the planning department and the neighborhood association. And then, as Jackie said, further down, there's all these kind of car dealerships that have these zoomy metal exteriors and things, and so there was that as a precedent. And then the stealth part, just making a dark building that kind of tries to be background, doesn't sort of shout I'm here, but really kind of blends into the landscape. And all these led us to, and them wanting something durable, low maintenance to no maintenance, not fussy, led us to cladding it with weathering corrugated metal cladding that would darken over time and just kind of blend in to the landscape.
So for the planning department, we did this series of before and after photos. Before with the peach stucco box, and then the after with the cladding. There were renderings, and they were taken from as if you're whizzing down the highway, because this stretch of Redwood Highway actually was parallel to the 101, so everybody can see it. Going up,
but only like
the one,
like that, right?
But it fit in.
It did. Sure. It did. Yeah. The one concession that they had us incorporate, because originally we were just, it was just this unbroken, 15-foot tall wall of corrugated weathering steel. They said, well, it needs a cornice or something. So we did incorporate an abstracted cornice. The top 3 feet or so are perforated, and there's a metal trim architrave, if you will, that sort of sets that cornice off from the solid weathered steel. And I mean, super subtle, but we studied a lot of different perforation patterns to get the right amount so that you could see the difference between the solid and the perforated, but it wasn't so perforated that you could see the Tyvek waterproofing back behind it. So
yeah, that would be a good thing. Well, one of the things I love in looking at the exterior of this building and that corrugated metal is there's a different personality that pops out through those windows.
Well,
you might have this, little bit cooler, rougher exterior that just kind of blends into the community. Every time I glance, it's like, but that's not what's going on inside.
Right.
And that, the difference in that I think is really cool. I mean, it screams warmth out those windows. It really does.
Right.
But the exterior doesn't.
Right.
And I don't know. I think I think you guys, your stealth thing worked pretty well. I mean, I would not drive by that on the freeway and think that it was the place that it is.
Right.
Being, a super high-end builder, but walking by it, I want to know what's going on in there.
Right.
Because it does not scream that typical contractor's office through those windows.
Yeah. Well, right. Definitely not a typical contractor. We could talk about more there regarding how they work. Yeah.
But we love that tension, right? Like it's stealth, but it's not so stealth that it's a one line, right? Like it's stealth, but then like you said, there's this interior kind of trying to stretch out and grab your eye that forces you to do a little bit of a double take, right? And it's like, wait, there's something going on in there. And even I think this comes down to, we love playing with that moment of kind of tension between inside and outside, or, one reading and another, and the details of how we, play with that moment, I think are really where we locate architecture a lot of times. I think you should talk about the shadow box.
Shadow box. So the shadow box is actually a recurring detail that has evolved within our office on different scale, different types of projects. And I think relative to this conversation, what's really nice about it is that it does its job. It frames the view, these, relatively large, openings, frames the view and really kind of, delivers that kind of, glimpse inside, contrasting with that exterior. It is also a different material. It's a lot more refined. I think, popping out from the weathering metal that's always going to be changing is this relatively matte constant. I think it was powder coated.
Steel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it does, it serves some functional purpose as well. These otherwise just, straight unarticulated walls are interrupted by the punctures for the fenestration. So these shadow boxes, provide a way to get some, the water away from the window. They do provide some sun shading because they're 12 inches deep. So the projection does provide a little bit of shading. Although the windows face west, and that's of limited use, and we can talk more about
the west side
and what was supposed to be there. And they provide some, articulation. And again, in this otherwise, hot skin, they provide some shadow. That's what we call them, shadow boxes.
Yeah. I don't know if we're the only people in the world who call them shadow boxes, but.
And we're not the only architects who deploy that, that language, but it is something that we've explored in residential projects and commercial projects and have refined over the years.
Well, I think the exterior design really piques curiosity, and I don't think it would do that in the same way if those windows weren't shadow boxes. I think that really contributes to that, and that's what you want architecture to do, right?
Right.
Make you go, ooh, what's that? What's going on there? What's, ooh, that's pretty. Whatever. You want people to look twice.
Yeah.
And maybe question its existence. So it works. It works really well. What about your inside your walls? You talked about the toothpick kind of framing. Did you guys do anything in there to shore that up, or did you
end up sistering?
I think they sistering, but I think they reframed it with 2x6, to get more insulation. I mean, we did, we had to be Title 24 because we were changing the envelope and changing the lighting and everything. So they sistered on, I believe, 2x6s. And I'm trying to remember I think they balloon framed it past the roof to create the parapet, and then had kickers to support the parapet because it cantilevers above the roof pretty far. So yeah, we definitely improved the envelope.
Okay, so moving on to the interior. Let's, before we get into specifics about some of the unique things you did on the interior, tell me what kinds of spaces this client was going to need inside this building. I'm assuming it's not just all one big, huge open space.
Yeah. So there were quite a few amenities. And I think, which is very exciting, that they're kind of thinking about wellness of the employees before things like well came around.
Yeah.
Such as, gym and lounge space and being amenable to these outside spaces.
And a really nice big communal kitchen.
Exactly. Yeah.
A communal eating table. Yeah.
Right. So there was that. And then in terms of, for those who were, doing the work day to day, it wasn't just like, oh, this is where the desks will be and this is where the conference rooms will be. But in their terms, there was emphasis on collaboration. That's how they work. That makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Architects and contractors similar in that sense. And their term and understanding of conference was war room.
Right.
War room was the place where they were going to hash it all out. And these spaces needed to be basically immediately related to the places where people would sit down and might do their individual work. And that was the bullpen. So, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at the plan and the photos, the main office area is organized around these, as Jackie says, these central war rooms, which have a tall partition, two kind of C-shaped partitions that you can enter from either side, about I think 6 feet tall or so. And the inside of those are a tackable surface. And the idea was, in the old days, and this has changed since then, but since we've gone, digital, a contractor would get a set of drawings from an architect and pull the whole thing apart, into the various, CSI divisions or subcontractors, right? And, do area takeoffs and notes and things like that. And, so that set became the kind of center of activity. The idea was in the war room was where that drawing set was, and, parts of it are pinned up on a wall and parts of it are on a table. And then the team that are working on that project are in the second, ring of desks, which is the bullpen, that are centered around that war room.
And in theory, a singular project, this couldn't actually be true, but a singular project was assigned to that area.
Right.
So all of the pinup space was about that. And everybody who worked on it and got together in that war room would then, be hanging out and working together surrounding that space.
Yeah.
So,
and that, this is a funny, I think, or an interesting story about, finding the balance between designing, any kind of space, but, say in this case, workplace, specific to the way people work, but not being so rigid that when the way that they work changes, it isn't adaptable. And so, in hindsight, and, we still work with them, and, we hear and we talk to people who, work in that space, they don't necessarily use it that way, but there is at its core, the DNA of that layout is collaboration. And they do really still kind of collaborate in these kinds of teams. And so, it's specific enough that it still fosters a kind of collaborative layout versus just rows and rows of desks. But wasn't so rigid that, when this idea became a little bit outdated, that they were kind of locked into some form that doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
I was fascinated when I was looking at this picture and, okay, start telling me about the interior, what kinds of spaces you had. I'm like, what is that thing in the middle of this kind of somewhat ring of desks? That's genius. No, I am not kidding. Office design, while I've definitely worked on offices over the years, hasn't been where the bulk of my work has been, but I have never seen anything like that myself. Been around for a while. And not only does it provide this place, especially like in our business where everything's a team environment, this place to have your little war room, but that war room is taller than that outside ring where the desks are. And I'm not a fan of the big open office environment.
Right.
As a spec writer, I can't concentrate with all this stuff going on around me. And while this is an open office, those interior walls of the war room being taller than the exterior walls of the ring of desks provides a little bit more buffer and privacy than you would typically have in just a big open office with a bunch of desks.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. But
having that collaboration space right smack dab in the middle of your team.
Right.
I am in love with this. For my listeners, go look at these pictures because that's pretty. I wouldn't know this was a contractor's office for all the money in the world if you just handed me these pictures and didn't tell me anything. The big living room area, the picnic tables outside, all the light, the beautiful wood. But my favorite thing, head and shoulders right now, is that desk and war room layout. Hands down. Wow. Tell me about interior finishes. What are some of the notable or just, things you would like to highlight that you did for interior finishes? Because again, this does not look like a contractor's office. I understand they're high end, need to make a statement, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think the black and steel is a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it goes right in line with their kind of stealth, industrial, but refined kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
We use those on the outside of the the bullpen, actually. So the shorter partition.
Mm-hmm.
We use those.
And then it, picks up in the framing of there are a row of glassed in enclosed offices along the west side. And those are, they're not blackened, but they're black metal and powder coated steel frames. And then, the black storefront framing around the courtyards. And otherwise, it's, it's all about the exposed wood roof structure, right? Which has its own inherent beauty and really just sandblasting that, cleaning it up, painting all the sprinklers, organizing the new lights in a nice, interesting way. And then the floor, which is a funny story.
Well, the floor we didn't have too much control over, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. They basically, we knew we had to replace, they pulled up all the carpet and it was just, plywood. And I think we had an idea that we would do a beautiful, wide plank, a European oak, hand scraped wood floor, like they do for their clients. And they just one day said, "Oh, we just got 3 truckloads of reclaimed, oak flooring of varying lengths and widths and colors, and we're just going to use that. We're done." We're like, okay,
Classic.
Great.
Classic.
And it works. It works.
Yeah.
It works. It's totally, again, it fit in nicely with this, kind of rough and refined contrast on the interior.
Exactly.
It works very well, but I got to go back to these desks. That's steel on the outside of those?
Okay.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I figured it was some kind of paint or finish.
Wow.
to look like steel or look like a dark kind of finished concrete. But that's actually, I'm in love. I'm in love over here. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm in love with this whole desk setup.
I would say it's the same as the reception desk.
Yeah.
Same black and
and this is the great thing about working for a contractor on their own office is, of course, they all have all these subcontractors and vendors who they give tons of work to. And so they got some favors, they got, I wouldn't say they got everything for free, but they got, heavy discounts on things. So, where, for another client, you might not be able to afford, beautiful black and steel, partitions on the desks. They were able to, get it, I think, for a pretty reasonable price from the vendor. And as Jackie said, it's, I think, the same fabricator that did the faceted front desk, which was a fun piece.
I saw that as well, and I kind of figured once you told me those were steel, which I did not know. And then I went back and looked at the desk picture, and I'm like, I think that's from the same arena.
Yeah,
that got contributed, but and it's a beautiful contrast with the floor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, with the natural materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the desk is a fun story about process, and if you want to get into that.
Sure, tell me about it.
Yeah, Jackie.
That's a unique desk, a really unique desk.
We had a lot of fun with the desk. I think that the story with the desk is that I think it was a perfect example of the unique process of working with a client who's also the contractor. And the propensity for a contractor to want to find what we think are shortcuts or what they're calling shortcuts. I'm not sure if they really are at the end of the day. But in any case, what happened with that one is that we approached it from what we thought was going to be a very traditional, linear, standpoint. And we go in with, square one. We have concept. We're inspired by these other, desks that we see that are published. And we, start massing, thinking about what's the form. And we ended up doing some early studies with potato. And not because that's our thing. Honestly, it was, mom stuck at home with young, children on a really strict sleep schedule. And it's like, hey, I got these potatoes. I know we got to think up something for this desk. And actually it was a really great material to work with because it was so immediate, and as soon as you make a slice, thinking about how, the form ought to be very quickly, you only really have a few more slices before you're done.
Right.
Because similar constraints on your potato were that you just couldn't get too complicated with it before it became too expensive or hard to build or dysfunctional. And so we did these early studies, had a bunch of potatoes, then took it into the 3D model. Then we're drafting in documentation, right? And out of the blue, contractor just raised their hand and said, "We're done. Thank you. That's good. Let's get down here." And we were busy with many other things. And it wasn't till months later of radio silence, we get the email with shop drawings attached. And they were a distant cousin from what we had last worked on, and had to just keep going forward from there. We went to go, visit the shop fabricator, and literally I remember standing over a really nice fabricator shoulder with the AutoCAD file and just trying to identify a couple of points that we could, revise and push and pull to kind of make something out of where we were, what we had at that time. And it ended up great.
Yeah.
I think everybody was happy.
Yeah.
But that was our new process for working on that one particular piece. Surprise.
The potato-inspired desk. What I want to know, what I want to hear is I want all of my listeners who are my younger professionals or students that listen to this podcast to send me pictures of your potato models that you take into class when you do it, because I think you just inspired a whole movement.
They're compostable, you can hold it and wear
soak it in some lemon. They don't turn brown. Us moms know all the tricks. No, but what a fantastic, quick, easy way to work out some ideas.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that, but it is I would take a smaller version of that in my downstairs as a bar.
Totally.
If they want to send me one. No, I love that story. I absolutely love that story, especially since I raised a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
You talked about customizing the workplace to the client, yet keeping flexibility to allow for changes in the way that they work. So tell me where the flexibility features are. What do you mean by that? I guess I can't even form my own question correctly. Like, they decide they want to be a architecture firm next week. Where did you afford this flexibility so that they can grow into different ideas or different things that they do?
I mean, I think, it's back to the war room and the bullpens, that finding that balance between kind of customizing it to a very specific idea of how they work but not making it so rigid. Because at the end of the day, it's really built around an idea of collaboration, right? And how space can foster collaboration, how space and architecture can facilitate different scales of association, right? From the individual hunkering down in that war room with, the acoustical pin-up panels around them and quiet and focus to, the team and, being able to kind of collaborate. Interestingly, they don't face each other. They face outward, but yet they can turn and talk to their teammate, which again gives this kind of, you have a little both and, right? Like, you're facing out, you're not, you have a little bit of, you can focus and be sort of private, or you can turn to your teammate. You're not always just sitting there, talking to each other across the desk. And then, beyond that, the scale of the entire, workplace space, and, other teams, and overhearing, they just had that same issue, in project B over there. I just heard, their project manager talking about it. I'm going to jump up and go talk to them over there. And that's all, that's universal to, I think, the way any business really in the 21st century, works, collaboratively sharing of ideas, spontaneous, cross talk. And so I think that's the flexibility that we're talking about, that the design is specific, but also taps into some universals that, we could move in there tomorrow and, function perfectly in that space. A tech incubator could move in there tomorrow and function in this, although there may be too much light for all people to work on computers, but they can go down in the basement. I don't know. I don't know if there's more in terms of that.
And also the forward thinking of all the amenity spaces.
Yeah. I think that's,
legs over time.
That has legs, and not that we, saw the pandemic coming or at the cutting edge of workplace trends, but, understanding that work and life, and, like there aren't these kind of black and whites, right? And that, yes, people come to work, but they also, that's where they spend the majority of their daylight hours, and it needs to be a great place to be. And, you form friendships at work, and you want a place that, fosters that kind of casual interaction, and that, incorporation into the DNA of a space, I think also gives it the longevity and the flexibility to, have a long life as a workplace for any kind of operation.
That's right.
So just briefly, before we move on to construction, because I've been dying to talk about construction on this one, what would you say is the biggest design? Just pick each of you one thing, and maybe you'll agree on the same thing. What was the biggest design challenge in this building?
Why?
I started thinking about something physical, but honestly, I think it was just the process.
Yeah.
Just the process, working with the contractor client.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. It was a big learning curve for us. We hadn't worked that way, and that kind of, being fluid, and we kept trying to rank, to kind of shove that project into our process. And, we have a pretty refined and rational and it's not rigid, but it's a process that allows us to, to work efficiently and to make decisions and not go backwards, and stay on budget and on schedule and on fee, and, all of those things. And we kept kind of, we would go down that road a little ways and realize something that we're detailing they've already built. Like, okay, well, they're not wasting any time on that. And then, we'd say, okay, and then we would work on something else, and, find ourselves on that road again, and detailing something that they've decided, well, we're not going to do that. Don't waste your time on it. Well, we already did. Well, don't bill us for it. Okay. And so it took us, a little while to just kind of get comfortable with that, and to let go, and be like, I walk in there, and some of the detailing and the execution, I kind of have to squint my eyes and say, looks good enough, and to be okay with that, and just kind of just let go and say, within the context of the overall goals of the project, it's all fine. It all works. And we're still very, very proud of it. And, they are too. So, and that was the biggest design challenge, more than anything physical. Yeah.
So down a rabbit hole about that for a second, because just listening to that stresses me out. We have a way that we typically work in this business. I'm not saying that you can't stray from that, but when you've been doing things, you do this before this, before this, you do that for a reason.
Yeah.
And you're not my first interview that did a building for a contractor where it was their own building. One of my very first interviews on this podcast was the same thing, one right here in Portland, Oregon. And architects are not builders, and builders are not architects. And so I imagine there had to be some lessons learned, probably on both sides, being this deeply embedded with each other throughout the whole process. And I don't know, maybe that lesson was just learning how to just take a deep breath and say, okay, it is what it is. I think I'd be in a funny farm, but would you say that by being that tightly entwined with the contractor throughout the whole design process, that you kind of learned more about how the other half lives, so to speak? And how contractors think and work, that you think will maybe help inform projects down the road in how you, even if you're not working like that, in how you design your buildings?
For sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, even in projects where, later projects that came after that were with that contractor and they were not the client, but it was in a different way, a very non-traditional client, architect, contractor, relationship and delivery process. We were more, and Jackie, worked on at least one of those. We were more prepared to be able to step into that, that stream and not, try to be, the rock that just resists, but, kind of swim with the current, and
swim with the current.
Yeah.
Focus your energies.
Yeah.
Where they're really going to be used. Not matter, but used.
Right. Right. Right.
I imagine those subsequent projects, there's also probably some questions you asked earlier after going through that process. Like, okay, like you said, you had a detail and then they said, we don't want that and don't bill us for it. There might have been some things like that. I would think that you would, let's have a conversation before we do this or before we go here, because this might be one of those things that some other mindset is going on.
Yes.
And I don't like to call any of these problems. They're not problems. They're the challenges of construction or design that we all go through.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think it's as painful as it can be in some moments, a very positive thing, because it does force you to get out of your box and look at things from a different point of view. And we all grow from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would be twitching the whole time.
Sure.
So like I said, construction is always a journey. And there's a lot of things we learn with the actual construction. Not so much the process, but the actual building of the building. Sometimes you rip open a wall and, oh, there's something there that we didn't know was there, and we can't do what we were planning to do. Did any surprises come up or pivots that you had to make during construction that taught you something that you'd like to share? Or how did you solve that problem that might help somebody else if down the road if they encounter that situation? Or did construction go pretty smooth because it was their own building?
I mean, the biggest aha was really about the exterior walls, facades, and the lack of structure there.
Yeah. So the roof structure, again, I said, is these big glue lambs. They have a camber on them, and that camber also kind of creates the way that the roof drains, to the perimeter. And these courtyards that we carved in, have parapets, around the perimeter of the courtyard itself. Originally, we were going to create a sloped skylight over the top of those courtyards using cowl wall, and we were going to basically make the southern parapet taller, and then slope basically so that the cowl wall was facing north to get north light. And we went around and around with the structural engineer and contractor on how to frame that wall and brace it, and the roof was also covered. We covered it with photovoltaics, so there was all this extra load on this roof that was never designed to have that kind of load. And at the end of the day, we had to abandon the slope skylight and parapet because we just couldn't find a cost-effective way to build that and not overload the structure. Funny enough, years later, I I drive on that road, and every time I drive, I look over, look at the building, because it's continued to darken, over the, now it's just like, I mean, if you look at it today versus the photos, because we got it photographed, a few months after it was finished, and the weathering steel, there were still some gray areas, and now it's almost like this maroon dark, build. Anyway, so I look over my shoulder one time, and I see there are these big sloped skylights on top of the courtyards that they retrofitted somehow. Maybe they didn't call the engineer this time. They just built them and said, screw it, we're going to build. Because they keep the rain out, and you can actually use the courtyards. They're much more functional that way. So that's a real kind of construction challenge that I remember. I mean, the rest of it was so straightforward. We didn't do anything that fancy. So yeah, that was it.
Well, and I would imagine, number one, being intertwined with the contractor from day one, because they're also the owner, and it being their building.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, is going to be a little bit more invested in, getting it right and doing it well. So there might be a testament to that old master builder model, or that, or the design build under one roof and one risk umbrella.
Right.
So we always ask a couple of closing questions on every podcast. The first is a broad industry question. The last is our world domination question. Everybody gets that one, so there's no escaping it. So first, the broad industry question. I've done a few interviews with architects who have had GCs for clients on their own building. What advice would you give to another professional who may encounter that situation? What could they do in the very beginning that would ease that process all the way down the line?
Yeah, I think we referred to it just now about the advantage of having candid conversations early about how we all think it's going to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, really, as an architect, embracing it as an opportunity to work a little differently, challenging ourselves, even if we don't plan to do it that way ever again. It's a good stretch. I think it forces us, both to learn how to, flex and get out of our comfort zone. And it reinforces why we do it the way we do it normally, when that's the right way. So I think, for any architect, I would say embrace it, look at it as an opportunity. Don't be afraid. You may just do it once and never again, or you may do it and say, that was interesting. Maybe I could be a little more flexible. And then, I think not trying to force it into a box, and just having the candid conversation, and saying, hey, what level of design and documentation do you want and need? And how can we, provide that to you, and also, protect ourselves, and, let's find the right balance so that, we're satisfied and happy, and you're satisfied and happy, and then doing that, not just at the beginning, but, along the way, because it probably will change, as you go along. So, checking in at regular points and saying, how are we doing? Is this, have we got a good system here, or do we need to kind of pivot a little bit? So.
Yeah, it sounds to me like just knowing that from the get-go, that this is not going to be our traditional step-by-step process we're used to working, and approaching from day one that project with the attitude that, I'm not going to work the way I normally do. And I have to be really super open-minded, and I have to be prepared for things to move and change quickly.
Yeah.
I think just having that mindset, instead of, like you said, for a while there, you're trying to cram it into your process.
Yeah.
And knowing in advance it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I would walk into it right now going, okay, we're going to be pivoting all over the place. So what could we sit down and talk about how we're going to handle that and maybe get some kind of middle of the road process that works for everybody to ease some of those pain points.
Yeah.
along the way. Okay. Final question. Everybody gets this one. Just a little question, just a little one. As individuals, we all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of contribution to make the world a better place. Sometimes those are little things. Sometimes they're big things. Anything we do leaves ripples, in my opinion. I jokingly call that mission my personal world domination statement, meaning what can I do as an individual to make an impact on my world, what I can reach, what I have the ability to change, which is important to me. So personal or professional, how do you as an individual hope to make a difference or an impact on our world? What's your personal world domination statement?
That's quite a question.
Just a little one.
Come on, everybody answers your question.
Every single, we've done 80 episodes, published episodes so far. Every single guest answers that question. It doesn't, you don't have to have the whole list. You could just tell me one way that you would like to make a difference that goes beyond you.
Yeah, so I think, and I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but one thing I would like to keep in mind, remind other people is that, when you're faced with a problem, to don't forget, look to the people right in front of you. And collaboration is, that sounds cheesy, but it's really key. I don't think anyone is expected to solve problems as an island alone in their room and then come out and be like, got it, ready? And so I think, the power is really in all of us together. So community, collaboration. Yeah.
Just so you know, there is no right answer. And more problems happen in this world from lack of communication than a lot of things. So anything that a person does to help foster better communication and collaboration, in my opinion, is a huge win and trickles everywhere. How about you?
All right.
You thought you were going to have more time.
No, it's fine. Well, I have one that I don't know. You may have to delete or scrub, but and if you do, then I can give you another one. Actually, my personal and professional goal is to prove or demonstrate to the world that you can do great architecture, build a great firm, work on amazing projects with amazing people, and not be an asshole.
Absolutely not. I'm going to be mad if they scrub that. Like, we're going to have a conversation if they scrub that, because I could not agree with you more. I talk often about, it is a changing world, and I see less and less and less of that, architectural ego that you hear a lot about. Like, I'm the center of the universe. I see less and less of that every day. Yeah. And I see more collaboration and less assholes. Okay, I swore once.
Yeah.
Sue me.
I mean, it's really and I believe that in the sense of, as Jackie's saying, collaboration and working with great teams and working with amazing clients, working with great contractors. Like, when we talk about the team, we talk about all of that, and our criteria is we work with nice people. And we're we're nice people too. And it just, we want to share the joy of what we do with the people that we collaborate with. And that is the most satisfying thing that we can think of.
I think you'll appreciate this story. And since we already said it, I'm going to say it one more time. When I was raising my kids, we, as parents, we all want to raise our children to be better humans than we've been. We've learned our life lessons that then we can impart on them, and we want them to do better in life, and we work our tails off for that to happen. And, all of our kids go through different situations growing up. And one of the things, and I partially raised 6 of these little monsters, and they were all totally different, and I love them all. But one of the things I used to tell my kids is, I am not raising judgmental human beings or unkind or not helpful, caring human beings. So you don't get to judge another human being. I don't care if they're black, white, brown, gay, straight, skinny, fat, rich, poor. I don't care. You don't get to judge them by that. The only thing I will allow you to judge a human being and whether that human being is going to be in your life is whether or not they're an asshole. And my kids, they're grown. They're all grown now, and they will tell you, this is what my mom always said. And they are very kind and inclusive human beings, but they don't suffer fools.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty good message. I love that message.
Okay.
Chris and Jackie, thank you so much for joining me today and for your warm, generous personalities and sharing this great project. I hope that I can have you back again in the future on another project.
We would love that.
I would be so lucky. Okay. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Cherise.
Thank you. It was awesome.